Welcome everyone. Today I shall be showing you how to use the Eden editor to familiarize yourself with it, the basic controls, and a little bit about how to make compositions, how to save them, and then also how you test out uh, that composition in the Eden editor. So, to get into the Eden editor, you have to hover with your mouse over single player, and then the bottom option calling it or saying editor. But now we can select a map, any map that will do. For now we shall go with Altus. Depending on how fast your computer is, it might load up a little bit faster or a little bit slower. So it has finally loaded up, and now it prompts us with an error. We can just close an error, any errors that we get. As long as we can close them, it is fine, and as long as we can keep going, that is also completely fine. So we are now in Eden. Let's go over some basic controls. Now we are in Eden. You have WASD. W is for going forward, A is for striving left, D is for striving right, and S is going for backwards. How do we turn the camera around? Well, I used the right mouse button while holding it down, and moving the mouse we can look around. We can look up, down, left, and right. We can change the altitude of our camera with Q to go up and Z to go down. And if we press shift, we go faster around. Now, we can also zoom in using scroll wheel and zoom out also using scroll wheel. Those are the basic movement keys in Eden. So we have some key bindings within the Eden editor, which is Control Z, Control Y, Control Z, and Control Y. As you know, it is undo and redo. Control C and Control V is to copy items. Then we have Shift, which if you want to rotate an object, you use Shift and you can rotate an object. If you use Alt, you can change the altitude of an object. And if you use spacebar, you can switch your widget. Like let's place down an object or a player. If I press spacebar, you get the area widget, and I will go over this in a second or in a minute. And you can use backspace to hide your menu. So those are how to control Eden, how to move around in Eden. So let's go a little bit over the menu, what we have. If we were to click in the left bottom or left top corner of menu, we have scenario. Under scenario, we have the option to create a new map or a new mission file. If we were to click this, it will open up the select terrain viewer, and we can select any terrain we want to build on. Then we have open. We will now go to the folder missions or MP missions. In this, you can also create folders if you want to by clicking right mouse button on MP missions, create new folder. You can change the name of a new folder, rename or delete it. And this is where you can save your missions. Generally, it does not really matter where you save your missions, as you can export them to multiplayer or wherever you want them to go. It's only to organize a little bit better, and as you might be able to see, mine is not that organized at all. Then we get save and save as. Save and save as for the first time saving have the same function. but after you have saved your mission for the first time, save as will make it able that you can save your mission under a different name if you want to, or if you want to use the regular save, it will save the current mission on that current name, like a Control S to quickly save your mission. So for now we shall go into a folder and call it tutorial. You can give a space in these names, or in your folder, if you were to go into your profile folder and then browse or navigate towards this mission file, it would call something like tutorial %20. %20 is in the file extension or in the file name always a space from spacebar. But I will go tutorial underscore Altis Eden. Save. So we already saved the mission, which is quite useful because if you're making compositions or missions entirely, you want to first save your mission and make sure that your changes do not get lost. Eden sometimes is a little bit known for wanting to crash if you have too many mods loaded, such as the 74th Legion, for which I'm making this video. We have a huge mod pack. Sometimes Eden is unstable and it will crash you. If you open up a certain map, it can crash you. So you want to be careful and you want to have autosaves on. So then in the scenario, we have publish to Steam Workshop. This is an option you can use if you want to upload your mission to the public to use on the Steam Workshop, but that's something I personally don't use. I don't export anything towards the workshop. And the next option is export. We can export mission to single player, multiplayer, to the terrain builder, and to SQF code. The most common ones are going to be multiplayer and single player for you to use. Then we can merge. If you have multiple mission files, as they are called, on the same map and you want to have them merge together, use the merge option and it will prompt you the menu just like you want to open or save, and you can select the mission file to merge it together. Then we have statistics. It will say how many comments you have, waypoints, and everything. Then we have show required add-ons. At this moment we do not require any add-ons whatsoever in this mission file, but as soon as we go and place down a Krogan, can now say show required add-ons, it's going to be 2 PBOs from Mass Effect Opposition. We can say open scenario folder, and it opens up the scenario folder in Windows Explorer, and this is pretty much the scenario folder. You can also say open log folder, and this shows all the logs of ArmA 3. So that's the scenario menu. You can also go to edit. Edit will have Ctrl Z and redo, undo and redo. You can say select all on screen, so if we have objects right here, it will all be selected. We have the transformation widget, no widget, and whatever. We can toggle the grid, we can set the vertical mode, toggle to surface snapping, toggle waypoint snapping. We can go into each phase, the scenario, intro, outro if you won, and outro if you lost, and assets type, objects, compositions, triggers, waypoint systems, markers, favorites, and toggle asset subtype. It's this menu on the right. Then we go to view. We can center on random position, and it will go to a random position on the map. Center on selected entity, can place down an entity, and it will center on this object. And also say center on player. For example, we have this thing down. We have this select, but we want to center on player. That's that. We can toggle map. Also can be used with M. And this is your map viewer. We can toggle surface textures. Where to zoom in, it should be able to give us surface textures in the map. But if you don't want it, then you can also say toggle map textures. Can also stay completely white. Can set vision mode. This can be set as normal, night vision or thermal vision. We can toggle a flashlight. Can toggle location labels, and we can toggle foliage. Toggle foliage will pretty much remove all the foliage around the mission, around the map. Then we have search. We can search in the asset browser or entity list, and we have the interfaces. I don't use this menu too much. I use what I have on the keyboard. But one menu that I use quite a lot is attributes. Under attributes, you have the general, environment, multiplayer, and performance tabs. Let's open up general. In general, we can see presentation, the scenario title, the author. We want to have a picture. We want to have a required DLC, for example, Lots of War. And we can say, yes, this requires the DLC, or no, it does not require the DLC. Can open up overview. This will give us an overview image that is visible in the scenario menu, as the other one is also visible in the scenario menu. Loading screen is for when you are loading up the scenario, you can have a picture there with text. Not too much too strange or not too difficult. Then we have the states of the mission. We can untick show briefing and not show the debriefing. We can disable saving. We can disable the map. So if you were to look on the map, it would show a black screen instead of the map. We can disable your compass. We can disable the watch. We can disable GPS or show the HUD. Can disable show UAV feed. We can also set it so everyone uses advanced flight model. Debug console, I will show you in a minute or in a moment. The debug console is currently it's set to only available in editor for each mission that we make available for the host or logged in admin. Usually for 75 Legion missions we untick these three and the rest together with this one stays like this. For overview we untick required DLC, otherwise people may get an issue with that they require Apex for a mission or contact or whatever DLC that is required by the mission as it thinks. And we also toggle that the independents are not allied to Blue 4 and are not allied to Op 4, but this is something you can change depending on your liking, depending on what kind of mission you want to run. Unlock keys are needed to mark scenarios as completed in the scenario menu. Can be multiple words divided by semicolons. This is if you want to make single player missions and campaigns. Init, this is the init field. This is directly attached to the mission, but we can also do it through making an init.sqf file, which is a lot handier, a lot more useful if you have bigger init scripts. You can say map indicators, you can pick these all and it will not show tactical ping, it won't show mines, it won't show hostile units, and it won't show friendly units. You can also say music, sounds, and radio settings. You can set sound to 0, and no one will be able to hear any sound or music or radio. You can also say random music, but we have to give in the class name. Intro text, we can set intro text if you want to have an Apex protocol style. This is something I don't use. I've never used it before. So if you want to experiment with it, go ahead. I cannot give you any knowledge on it. You can also do an ambient flyby of your starting location, type of aircraft, etc. Something again I haven't used before. Same with establishing shot and airdrop. For now, we shall focus on presentation, overview, states, and miscellaneous. Next one is environment. In an environment, we can set time of day. We can say it's quite foggy all of a sudden. Don't know why it's foggy. We can say weather forecast in 30 minutes or up to 8 hours if we want to. We can overcast start. This is as soon as you start the mission and the amount you forecast. Forecast changes as soon as time of changes has run down. So in 30 minutes I would have lots of fog. Right now it's clear like this, but as soon as 30 minutes hits, we would have fog that is this thick. You can do a manual override for rain if you want heavy rain, but this is something we generally don't use if you want the Zeus missions, because if you manual override anything, you will not be able to edit the weather in Zeus. You can override lightning, you can override waves, override wind, and you can also set your own visual settings, for example view distance. If view distance is set to -1, it means this option is disabled. Object view distance is also disabled and disable grass is also unchanged. We can set it to standard or grass disabled. We can set object view distance to 500 meters and view distance to 500 meters too if we want to, but it's something we don't want to because there are a lot of people that can run more than we want you to run, or we want you to run, and some other people, I mean. So that is the environment. Next is multiplayer. Quite important if you are making a mission and you want to try it out, or if you want to run it on a server. This tab is very important. So, multiplayer. You can say the type. It's a game type. We usually, for 74 missions, select cooperative mission because it's PvE, player versus environment, so it's co-op. You can also say King of the Hill, Deathmatch, or any of these others. But that's for you to play with. It's just generally information for you to use when selecting missions. But for us it's cooperative mission. And we can say how many minimal players we have in this mission. Set it to 5. We need 5 people before the mission can actually start. But we usually set it to 1 or to 0 and it will work regardless of what's set there, um, but it will give up errors. So usually for the 75 Legion we have a minimum of 1 and a max of 60 because the server does not support more than 60 slots. Then for the lobby, we can say a short summary shown in the scenario lobby. I leave this empty because we don't have to show it. But we can also disable the AI here. This is very important if you have multiple player slots down in the mission. Why? Simple. If you have 100 player slots down in your mission and you do not untick enable AI, you would have to go in and disable the AI in the mission in the lobby. If you don't, all the empty player slots become AI, and um, it will pretty much make a big cluster of AI walking around on your respawn point and dropping your frames right there. Something you don't want to do. You can also auto assign slots when players first uh, arrive into the scenario. We can pretty much say, okay, you will be assigned to the side with the lowest numbers of players in case you want to have a mission that is PvP with independents of 4 and blue 4 fighting against each other. And a respawn. This is very important if you want to make respawns work. Respawn, we always select respawn on custom position because we place a marker down with just respawn in the variable name, something I will show you in a minute. Or you can say respawn underscore west, or blue 4 respawn, respawn underscore east for the op 4 respawn, respawn guerrilla for the independents, and respawn civilians, civilian for civilians. Just respawn itself, barebone respawn, is available for all sites to respawn at. You can also say respawn underscore 1 or respawn west base. As soon as you say respawn 1, it will be a second respawn you will spawn at, and the game will decide on where you will respawn. If you say respawn west base or respawn west airfield, every blue 4 unit will respawn at respawn west base or respawn west airfield. If you have respawn east base as well, blue 4 will not respawn at respawn east base. That makes sense. You can enable a spectator. You can say mission fail when everyone is dead. I will untick it, especially for trying out missions in multiplayer. Do not tick mission fail when everyone is dead, because you want to be able to respawn. And set respawn and wave. Select respawn loadout. Select respawn low position. If you have multiple respawn locations around, you can have this selected. Show respawn counter. Single player death screen. Spectator. Subtract tickets upon death or upon respawn. So these are the options you can set for when people respawn on a certain point. We can set a respawn delay for people, for players, and we can set a respawn delay for the vehicles. We can disable the scoreboard in missions. We can allow or not allow you to manually respawn. We can also say team switch is enabled or not enabled. But this one is grayed out for me. I don't use it because we don't have multiple sites in the operation. We can allow or not allow a score. This is something we don't use. And respawn tickets for each side. Then we get to tasks. We can say shared objectives currently is disabled. We can say enabled or enabled with task propagation. This is something you can use if you have multiplayer missions that have multiple tasks around for people in like cooperative missions, such as a campaign or the ones you see in Apex. You can also do the revive mode. This is for vanilla, mind you, to revive players. We don't use it because we use Ace, and Ace does this all for us, so we can pretty much hide it. You can say dynamic groups, dynamic group system. This means if we enable it, as soon as you respawn in a different group. You can also say dynamic AI skill. If we enable it, we can say, okay, minimal skill is 50%, minimal not correct here, but minimal aiming skill is 30%, max skill is 80%, and max aiming skill is 50%. This is if we want to make AI on a certain site more challenging than other AI on that site. Like the game will automatically assign um, the skill level to each AI based upon their rank and such. So that is the multiplayer menu. So for now we have it set to respawn on custom position, and we will use a marker to make a respawn. Then the last one is performance. This is garbage collection. You can say minimal distance from any player. Set the value to 0 to remove the minimal distance. You can set it to 100 meters, and this will remove any dead things in the mission file. All scenario objects, or only objects can respawn, or objects that cannot respawn. Limit to 15 dead bodies a maximum in the scenario. The minimal delay before a dead body is being removed. That'd be for when the number of dead bodies is exceeded, and a maximum delay. Vehicle wrecks can do the same thing here to remove the destroyed vehicles and such. Dynamic simulation, we can enable dynamic simulation, or it's enabled by default. Only entities and groups with dynamic simulation will be affected. So it will say the amount of distance until characters, manned vehicles, props, and empty vehicles will be simulated. And activation distance modifiers for when units are moving around. And of course, limited by view distance. So that is the attributes. Then we have the tools, we have the debug console. It won't actually open up because of a mod that we have. We use a mod called swap, Star Wars Opposition, and this likes to screw with the options we have in Eden, so it does not all show up. Functions viewer. This is the functions viewer. We can go through all the functions that are in ArmA 3, and we can use this in our advantage when making missions. Config viewer does not open up at this moment because it's also being blocked by swap. Animations viewer, we should be able to edit animations. Let's have it load. There we go, it's loaded now. So we can say, okay, we want you to up left. You can pretty much change the animations or see the animations that the unit has. But let's go back to, I closed it, and let's go back to the Eden editor. Tools, we can also camera. This is the splendid camera you can use, something we don't use. To close this, we can just press escape, close splendid camera. And we can also open up the field manual for everything within ArmA 3. We have utilities, but this is something you can go over if you are in the Eden editor yourself. And in settings, the only important things we have here is preferences and add-on options. Preferences is for you. You have saving, autosave to set to 15 minutes. And also have to never, 5 minutes, 30 minutes and 1 hour. I leave it at 15 minutes. And I have this one unticked at all costs. Binarize new mission files on new scenario files. Why do we have it not ticked? Well, if you have scenario files or mission files that you make, if you binarize them and a mod change comes along, you will not be able to change your mission file out, take the dependency out, if your mission file gets broken when binarized. Because binarized pretty much makes it one big mess that you cannot read. We also have the default speed that we can use set for the camera to move with. Currently it's set to ×1. I'm used to the speed, but you can make it higher or lower depending on what you fancy. Copy terrain is pretty much if you know how to Zeus, and if you know when in Zeus your camera follows the terrain height. I currently have it turned off, but you can turn it on so the camera automatically stays at the altitude that you want it to be, instead of going around like I will demonstrate to you now. My camera pretty much stays at one altitude, and then the closer we get to the terrain, the camera will, well, relatively speaking, decrease in altitude. Otherwise, it would follow the terrain and my camera would now go up because we would go over a hill. And the other preference we have, adaptive speed, means the higher you go, the faster you will go in the camera. Start in map will pretty much start in the map viewer, and start on random position will say that you will start on any random position every time you open up a mission. Automatic grouping is on, so entities will automatically group onto each other like this. I place down a player right here, or a unit, and you can see that blue line between my mouse and the player. That's automatic grouping. If you go far away enough, that line disappears and it will make a new group. You can also recompile functions. We can recompile it every time the preview is started. Don't do it, it takes time. Environmental sounds like mosquitoes and butterflies will also be present in Eden Editor. Do it only if you really want to. I personally don't. And this is everything you can turn on in scenario, preview, and debug. So those are the preferences, and let's now go to add-on options. Because every single mission that the 74th Legion makes, we put all the add-on options in the mission file. Not on the server, because they can actually be edited. For a mission file, yes, you technically can still edit them if you overwrite mission file on the server, but you at least have to restart the mission to do so. Otherwise, mission file will be locked. You will not be able to change the settings in the mission file when the mission is running. Here we pretty much import our settings. For mission development, we have a pretty big list. We import that list into here, press OK, and add-on settings will be set correctly to what we fancy. You can also export it, save it, and load it if you want to. That's for you to use. So, I've shown you what all these menus are. Players, of course, if you want to play in single player with briefing, single player at camera position, spectate in single player, and play in multiplayer. This is what I always use if I want to go in and try out mission files. You can also use help if you need more help, and Eden Enhanced is a mod we use, so even more help if you need it. So now let's get back, let's go and make some compositions, right? Enough theory crafting. So to make a composition, it's going to be very easy. On the left we have the entities and locations menu. Everything we will make will be dropped into the entities menu. On the right hand side we have the assets and history. Assets have 1 for objects, then we have blue for independent civilians and props. Then we have compositions with group for blue for independent and civilian, and then props for compositions that have been made by mods, and then your own custom compositions you have made previously. And the next menu is triggers. You can set up triggers if you want to. This is a trigger that has no area around it. This trigger has an area of 100 meters in a radius. This is 500 meters, and this is a square box 10 meters by 10 meters by 10 meters. This is something you most likely won't use in your missions at this moment because it's more advanced. Waypoints. This is for your units if you want to have them do anything, if you want to give them any waypoints for your single player mission. Experiment with it in your mission. Systems or F5 is quite important. In here we have all the modules we can use in Eden, with the most important ones being, in my opinion, the Game Master to make Zeus. Let's place a Game Master down because we will need it in a second. We also have logic entities. We can place down locations, miscellaneous for curator, logical things, virtual sites, things you want to have present like headless client or anything. But this is something you most likely will not use. And then the last one is markers. It will automatically toggle us to the map view, and every time you want to make a mission, you want to make a respawn. So how do we make a respawn? Well, I already showed you through attributes into multiplayer with respawn on custom position, and to make this work we have to use a marker. We always use the empty marker because it will not actually show up on the map, but it's still there in your Eden editor. Click on it, double click on it to open up the attributes, and now we will call its variable name respawn. Click OK, and we have made ourselves a respawn point. That is how you make a respawn point work, and now the only other thing we have to go and do to make this mission work is to have a player slot. For the player slot I say variable name A1, and Game Master is going to be owner A1. So these two are now linked together. I will also say default add-ons. I will say all official add-ons, including unofficial ones. We can give the name if this is going to be a slot on its own, and if you are going to have a forced interface. A forced interface will pretty much mean that you will not be able to close the interface. So, this is currently what we have set up. Of course, and the respawn as well. Here's the respawn located, now currently right next to us. Let's double click on the player. So, object type, we can set the object. If you made a mistake and you want to select a different unit, you can select it. So we are going to select ammo bearer, and as soon as I click OK, my combat lifesaver will change into ammo bearer. Variable name can only be unique. The game will tell you if you are using a variable name that is not unique, it cannot process that. You can have an init on this object if you want certain things to initialize through when this object becomes live or active. Object transformation is its position on the x-axis, the z-axis, and the y-axis. You can set rotation on the red, green, and blue axis as well. This one is important. If you have AI down or you have multiple slots down, you want to make them playable, select playable. Now you can also give a role description. So for example, I'm going to call it Zeus, and in the lobby you will see that this is called Zeus. Object states. We can give it 100% skill or 20% skill, but this is important for AI. Health and armor will mean at 100% your full health, at 0 you're dead. Ammunition, 0 is you have no ammo, at 100% you do have all the ammo in the world. Rank, what kind of rank are you? I'm going to set ourselves to colonel, and then the stance we're going to be crouched. So as soon as I click OK, he's going to be crouched. Fleeing coefficient, the higher the number, the easier the AI will flee, the lower it will not flee at all. But we're a player, so this does not matter for us because we're not AI. Recoil is something we don't change, weapon sway is something we don't change because it can affect states after respawn and such. We can set animations, and we can set special states. I would say experiment with everything you have in here, because for now it's not required in this tutorial. We have made it a playable slot, and as you can see, he has crouched now, and it's now an ammo bearer as well. So that's player slot, that is Zeus slot, respawn done. So that's what we need to try out these missions. Let's quickly save with Ctrl S to save it, and that's that. Now, let's make compositions. I'm going to first clear up the weather a little bit, so I'm sick and tired of rain. There, much better, no clouds, whatever. Great. So, let's get started with making compositions. Now I want to have rocks. I pretty much type in rock, and I add rocks, lots and lots of these rocks, and place them. It's a nice, very nice rock. Let's go with this, select everything for a moment, and move towards a hill. As you can see, this rock forms to the terrain, but sometimes you don't want that. You don't want it to form to the terrain, or some objects do not form to the terrain at all. Like this forms to the terrain, but I don't want it to form to terrain. I want it to fade into the hill. So what do I do? Well, quite simple. Up here we have toggle widget coordinate space. We have toggle vertical mode and toggle surface snapping. These are three very important options, especially when building compositions and saving composition and taking out the composition from under here. If we were to drop this now, it would not look right. Like, let's drop it here. You see, it's not lining up. It's not lining up at all. Let's toggle vertical mode. Let's drop it again. And ta-da, it lines up. That's something you want to watch out with if you are dropping in compositions. If things suddenly don't line up anymore, you have forgot to toggle this option. So it's now toggled to a flat line not forming to the terrain. If you select it and we turn it around, we can see the object now stays flat instead of snapping to the terrain. Can move it into the terrain to the likes of you. So you can have rocks that don't stick out like a sore thumb, like this one does, but you can actually have it fade into the hill or into the ground. You can also say toggle surface snapping. This will pretty much mean that any object will not snap to surface of anything. You can also say it has to snap to the surface of anything or of something, and you will see this object snaps to the top of this rock. you can see that it snaps because we now have a blue cursor with the two triangles on the top and bottom. And as soon as we lower it, it snaps and the two stripes appear on the left and the right side. Now you know it snaps to a surface. That is quite useful if you want to have your respawn marker on an object in the sky. You want to have that respawn marker snap to its surface. Otherwise, if it's below it, you are going to fall to the ground or to the object below it, or you are going to injure your legs if you're respawning above the object, with potentially killing you. And if you are being killed while respawning, well, you might end up in a loop, and that's not too fun for the players. So the toggle widget coordinate space is for this. You can see my unit just disappeared on the ground. I don't want that to happen, so I'm toggling it to conform to my terrain. This is my coordinate space widget. That's the red, green, and blue axis. And we can turn it around by pressing space again. As you can see, my character is pointing in a different direction right now. But my widget is still pointing in the same old direction based upon 0, 0 coordinates and rotation 0, 0. But we don't want that. We want it to move along the axis I'm looking at. Toggle it so it's completely filled in. And now suddenly my widget changed. So now what happens? I turn it a little bit, but my widget moves with my character or object, which makes it very useful if you are placing objects down and you want to rotate them and move them along a certain line. If you want to move them diagonally, you want to move them all in one direction. You don't want them to, if you want to go this way, you don't want to have to go in and move it like this. Why? If you can do this just fine. That's a lot easier, isn't it? For me at least, that's a lot easier. Then if we press space again, we get a rotation widget. You can rotate on the blue axis, green axis, and the red axis. This all again conforms with the toggle widget coordinate subspace. Then the next one is the red, green, and blue one again. This one doesn't work. I'm not exactly sure why it doesn't. The next one is something you actually don't see, but we have to go into the area marker for it to show up. So this one can be used to resize your areas with, or your markers, or your hide object with, or to change your trigger areas with. For the rest, it cannot be used to resize anything else. So then we have toggle translation grid. You can say my object has to snap to a translation grid from 1 meter down to 25 centimeters or up to 64 meters. Quite funky at some times, but if you use it right, it will be very handy. Toggle rotation grid is the same as translation grid, but this can be used to have your character or your object turn around 1 degree, 5 degrees, 15, 45, or 90 degrees. So that's what we use to rotate and move our objects around with. Let's now go into actually building that composition. So we have a nice base here, but we want to spruce it up a little bit. We want more edge barriers, so I'm going over to edge barrier 4 blocks big, and I'm going to close off this entrance. Yes, you can clip these things together because they're empty objects, they're static, and it doesn't matter. Do not do that with vehicles or objects that are dynamic, because they will get damaged. If I were to go in this APC, if I were to place this tank in here, this tank would go fly off in the distance, explode, and that's something you actually do not want to have happen to you or to your vehicles. Same with players, do not place them into static objects. So let's go around, place a little bit more around. Mind you, I'm using Ctrl-C and Ctrl-V. You can also see Ctrl-C, Ctrl-Shift-V. Ctrl-Shift-V placed the object on its original position from where you copied it. Quite useful if you are up in the sky making stuff like this. And if you Ctrl-V now, it goes to a different position. Or sometimes if you have the form to terrain off, it drops on the ground and you have to raise it up again. Something I don't really want to do too often. So I use Ctrl-Shift-V and I'm at the same altitude. No things to worry about. A lot more useful if you are building in the sky or you're building ships or whatever. So we now are going around. We have built ourselves a small modification to this base. Toggle this so we have freeform on the rotation. You can see I'm using Shift to rotate my objects. The orange marker is in which direction it's pointing. So we now have our composition made. Let's take away our player slot. We now see all these yellow markers, which mean objects that we placed around. This is my new composition that I want to save. I will only, however, save the objects that I have selected, so the objects that I have placed myself. We can go and say, okay, I'm going to put this in a new layer, into a new map, and I'm going to rename this layer to edge barriers. I can say enable transformation, no, untick it, and suddenly the objects are not in my interface anymore. I cannot edit them anymore. Yes, you still can if you select it, but this is done if you want to clean up your interface and you don't accidentally want to move an object around you just previously placed. So you can lock it. You can even hide it if you want to. So let's select all of these. Now we want to make it in a composition and we right click on it. We then say save custom composition. You can give the title edge barrier tutorial. Author is me, Devil Creator, and under what category do we want to have it? It doesn't matter under what category you do. It's for me to just space out what I have, but it doesn't. You can also have it under any category you want to have. So we just saved it as a composition. Let's find it. I call it edge barrier tutorial, and you now see yellow markers popping up. That is all the objects that we have made as a composition on that base. As you can see, some things like this happen if you have it formed the surface of the terrain. We quickly delete it and place it down again, and you suddenly see it actually forms to the terrain of this hill, as that's how it was saved previously. This is quite useful if you are going to place around an acclimator assault ship. For example, let's place it around. Let's get ourselves the acclimator. You see lots of objects. Let's place it around. Currently it's nicely formed, exactly as how we want it to be. But let's undo it. Let's say, yes, I want to form to the terrain. And now I shall show you what will happen if you forget to turn this option to not snap to the terrain or not form to the terrain. Ta-da! The ship spawns in the air, all the objects get fucked up, and your players are on the ground. That's something you really don't want to have happen to you. So if this happens, you know that you did not tick this option, so it actually does this stuff and snap to the terrain. Ctrl Z, untick it, or so it doesn't form to the terrain, and place it down, and it places down fine. Ta-da, no issue. As you can see, my game is a little bit chugging along because I have this many player slots over here. Let's quickly hide them. And my game is doing a little bit better. Because I have this many objects on my screen, it means my Eden editor becomes a little bit slow. I don't really want that to happen. So I'm going to lock all of this, and suddenly I'm a lot faster. So if you have a lot of objects around, you want to put it in a folder and lock it, and make sure that you're not lagging around through Eden. It also again means I cannot move this now because it has been placed. I cannot accidentally drag the players out of it and then to just find out in the mission that they are coming down from 1000 meters up and that they are going splat. So that is how to make a composition, that's how to place a composition. I've spoken about how we want to go and move around in Eden, what every single menu does. And the last thing pretty much is how to try it out. I'm quickly going to delete this. Together with the respawn point, I'm going to delete it because we have another respawn point, the acclimator. If we click play, test in multiplayer, click test in LAN, and we have all our play slots load up. Click OK once you have selected your slot, and you will connect to your server that you're currently hosting now in multiplayer. And you will be able to play your mission, try it out, test it out, make sure everything works correctly before you send it out to anyone else or before you upload it to the server for to be played. Takes a little bit of time to load up, but that is totally normal for the bigger missions. The bigger your mission, the more objects you have around, the longer the load time will be. As you see, we have spawned from the acclimator. With the acclimator, the respawn marker is on this platform right here. If you want to move up the respawn marker, you have to select the respawn marker and use the green, red, and blue axis to move it around. To get it up on an object, you pretty much have to set it to snap to object, and then drag it up until it snaps to the platform you want it to be on. So we can access Zeus as we made ourselves a Zeus slot, and we can move around to the composition that we have around. Now it's very foggy. I don't want fog, so I'm going to change the weather. Fog, goodbye. So let's go here. This was our base we made, our composition, and there everything is. Even if you decide upon hiding it, it still will show up in the Zeus interface or in the mission file. To respawn, simply click respawn and you will respawn on your newly created respawn point. I will quickly abort. Also, one thing I wanted to show you, this is the extended debug console. This debug console can be used in Eden sometimes as well to run commands, to execute them in Eden. For us it doesn't show up because it's disabled by swap, but you can actually toggle it and show it in Eden. Let's go back. And now we're back in Eden. So that is how you make basic compositions and such. Now you have a lot of objects around. Let's go in about how to optimize it a little bit. So you have yourself a huge ton of objects around and you want to reduce the performance impact of these objects. All the objects that do not have doors, do not have ladders, cannot move, whatever, everything that is static can be made simple objects. We select all of the edge barriers for now, right mouse button on it, attributes, and we can say in the special states, disable damage if we want it to not be damaged. We can disable its simulation and it will not be simulated at all. But we can also go in and say that we want to have a script on it, because under special states you cannot actually make it a simple object, but yet we can do that through the power of scripts or pieces of code. Let me grab a simple object script. With this small script, this call bis_fnc underscore replace with simple object semicolon will pretty much make every single object that I just made or that I selected into a simple object, and it will reduce performance impact by a lot. Don't do that on a player slot, because the player slot will get transformed into a simple object and it will just stand there and not do anything. Same with vehicles. Vehicles will change into simple objects. Can be useful if you have a lot of vehicles around and you want them to be part of your scenery. You can change them into simple objects, but you cannot interact with them anymore at all. Also, don't do it on objects that you want to have functions on or variable names, because they literally get replaced and every single function or variable name on it will get lost in the process. So that is how to make yourself a composition, that is how a little bit to optimize it, and that is how to try it out as well. Hopefully it was a little bit clear for you how to make these things. The last thing we shall go over, by the way, is how to share this with someone, because we currently have made ourselves HBR tutorial and we really want to share it with someone. So we want to go in to our profile. I'm currently CXE Devil. We have made it as a composition or a mission file. Mission file can be found under missions or MP missions, and compositions, once I'm showing here on the right, can be found under compositions. In here, pretty much look for the composition name you just made. For me, it's H-barrier 20 tutorial. If you are going to send someone a composition, do not send this and this file, but send them this entire folder, add to an archive, and send them this. Same with a mission file. If you have made a mission file, what some people sometimes still do is they go in and they send me a mission.sqm file. Great and all, but totally useless to me. I need the parent folder of that mission.sqm file as well, because that actually tells me on what map it is. Because VR tutorial.vr means it's going to be on the VR map. Same with splits pokeball test is going to be on the spaceball, or spaceball, the space map. But Takistan FunUp version 1 is going to be on Takistan. So always send us the parent folder of the mission.sqm as well. And once you have it, you can save that and share it to us over Discord, or not share it if you don't want to share it at all. But I hope you found this tutorial useful. I know I've been covering a little bit of the topics in a random pattern. That's what I do, but I hope you had I hope you were able to learn something from it, and I hope you will be able to make some compositions with it now. If you have any questions, I will link my Discord in the video description, and you can ask me questions on Discord if you want to. Mind you, I may not always respond because I'm always busy with things. Thank you for watching, and I hope you guys have learned something from it. And I'll catch you next time.